One of the issues, I think, in Washington today is what parts of the overall outline are sure to survive and which ones won't. The so-called red lines. The two things we've heard most specifically are middle-class tax cuts and taking the corporate rate down to 20%, which you referred to, for example, is the pass-through issue. Is that something that really the White House will press for and insist upon, will not compromise on?
Well, it certainly is part of the basic program, and it has been for quite some little while. It's an important element because of its impact on small business. And small business is also impacted by another reform that the president intends to put in, and that's the repeal of the death tax. It's bad enough to have to die. You shouldn't be fined for doing so. And that's a serious problem for small businesses, family businesses, particularly farms, which tend to be relatively illiquid and therefore have to be sold often just to pay the tax.
So there is a perception that, as you call the death tax, the estate tax, really benefits the very, very wealthy in the country. Do you disagree with that?
Well, the reason that it benefits people over a certain size is that everybody under that size has already been exempted. So the question is there any fairness to having just one portion of the population pay a death tax on values that largely have already been taxed? Most private businesses start out with very little capital, so by the time the entrepreneur dies, what's been built up is retained earnings on which tax has been paid, and therefore it's a little unfair to tax that twice.
It may be unfair or not, but is it possible to square the passion to get rid of the estate tax, on the one hand, with the press for middle-class tax cuts? It doesn't sound like the estate tax has much to do with the middle class.
Well, they're separate issues, but you could also argue, and we do argue, that reducing the corporate taxes, both the normal C corporation rate and the rate for the flow-throughs, that also benefits the middle class. Because when you think about the components of any business's costs, taxes one component, wages are another component, and materials and equipment are another final component. So to the degree that you have reduced the cost of one, it's very logical to think that there would be room to improve the amount allocated to some of the others, particularly wages.